Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, we discuss an article titled 5 Exercises Men Should Avoid to Regain Muscle, Experts Say. There is a lot to unpack, refute, and discuss in this, so listen in and learn whether there are indeed exercises to avoid to age well.
So, Dr. Armstrong, I came across an article, and I think you're really going to find this one interesting. The name of the article is 5 Exercises Men Should Avoid to Regain Muscles, Expert Says.
Expert. Oh, what's that expert? I looked at that article that you sent me, and it appears to be a gentleman who's, I don't know if he's degreed or not, but he's got 7 years of experience as a personal trainer, certified personal trainer. So he's certified. I'm familiar with the certification. It's not a really hard certification. You really don't even need a degree to get it. And that term expert, I really take issue with. Anytime I see expert, a little bit of a red flag comes up for me. I'm going to look at their credentials because I got a PhD and I have 25 years experience in teaching, exercise science, exercise physiology, many, many more years in kind of the fitness industry, and I would never call myself an expert. I don't know. I think actually the more I've learned, the more I learn I don't know. And so I think the expert, when you're an expert, you know what you don't know. And so, yeah, that's a first red flag to me in that article. Anytime I see expert, I'm going to be a little bit more suspicious of what they are talking about. So let's dive in. What are these 5 exercises that we shouldn't be doing to regain muscle?
Well, number 1 is cardio. While there is no denying that cardio is essential for overall health and adding years to your life, going overboard with your cardio sessions can kill your efforts to regain muscle. Excessive cardio can place your body in what's called a catabolic state, where it breaks down fat and muscle for energy.
Okay, now I agree with that. Now, I would not say avoid to regain muscle. I think we need a certain amount of cardio. When we talk about the health-related components of physical fitness, are cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, flexibility, and body composition. So it is important to our health. It's important to performance. But I think he's right in that we should not go overboard with cardio. And we've talked about this repeatedly on the podcast, that cardio can take away from your ability to regain muscle. But if you're using it in supplementation with resistance training, that's a little less of an issue. I think if you're training for a marathon, first of all, if you are training for endurance sport, carrying too much muscle is going to have a diminishing effect on your performance because you're having to carry more weight. And so you do want to be a little bit more cautious about how much muscle mass you're putting on. But when we do cardio, I think we should be doing higher intensity, shorter duration workouts, enough to trigger a cardiorespiratory response and to maintain cardiorespiratory health, but a greater emphasis on resistance training. So I'm kind of okay with what he says there with it, except for the fact that when you tie it into the title, we should not avoid cardio. We need to minimize the cardio, be effective and efficient in our cardio training so that we have more time for the resistance training that is going to allow us to regain, maintain, and more importantly, build muscle mass.
Speaking of resistance training, how do you feel about isolated exercises? Because that is number 2, isolated exercises. For the uninitiated, isolated exercise activates only one muscle group or joint at a time. Instead, the individual that wrote the article, they're recommending that performing compound movements such as squat, bench press, and deadlifts, all the things we talk about on our podcast, that work multiple muscle groups simultaneously.
Okay, now again, I would take this with a grain of salt, and then comparing it into the title when you say avoid, I would not avoid isolation exercises, but I would not prioritize them. And for most of us that are finding it difficult to get enough time to do resistance training, as we've mentioned numerous times on this podcast, we want to stick to essentially the basic 5. We're hitting those 7 movement patterns, things that are going to be, horizontal push, horizontal pull, or vertical push, vertical pull, the squat, the hip hinge, and the
Carries.
Yeah, so those basic 6 movement patterns, or when we break it down into exercises, it's like the bench press, the row, the overhead press, the squat, and a hip hinge like the deadlift. And so he's right on that. When we get into the isolation exercises, they just take more time. They are much more oriented toward building muscle, specific muscle. So they're good for hypertrophy. So that's where I think, why would you not? I mean, if you're a bodybuilder, if you're not doing isolation exercises, you're going to fail as a bodybuilder.
Correct.
But if you're an athlete and general individual trying to just improve overall strength, the compound movements are going to be most effective. You don't have to do bicep curls in order to build the biceps. I really do very little isolation exercise simply because I don't have the time. If I'm doing a rowing exercise, I'm working my biceps. If I'm doing a chest or shoulder press exercise, I'm working the triceps. When I squat, particularly doing like a Zercher squat, I'm getting a whole body movement out of that. And so I'm building and retaining a lot more muscle mass doing that type of compound exercise. And I would avoid leg extension, leg curls, again, unless you're a bodybuilder, because again, those are movements that are not going to, they're going to build size, but they're not going to be as efficient in building the size. So any other thoughts on that?
No, I'm a full supporter of full body movement. The more muscles, the more, if you can activate muscles from the top of the upper half of your body and the lower half and get them all working together, I'm a huge advocate for that. That's why I like that we talk so much about those 7 main exercises, that we kind of push people for so much. Isolated muscles, I think there are benefits of it. Obviously, you mentioned bodybuilders, but especially, if you do a core or you're doing a plank and you're just holding that plank position, well, that's technically an isometric exercise right there. You're holding it. Even if you were to throw in at the end of your exercise, the very, very last one, your last rep, and you just say you're doing a row and you're pulling that weight down and you just hold it and you're resisting gravity at the very end, it's still technically an isometric, is it not? Because you're just holding it, resist, and then finally, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, an isometric contraction is basically any contraction of the muscle where there is no shortening or lengthening of the muscle.
Right.
And so that could be a submaximal isometric. It could be a maximal isometric. We want to make sure that we are getting concentric, isometric, and eccentric contractions in the muscle. We did a recent podcast. I can't remember which number that was. It was at the end of season 1, where we talked about the importance of eccentric training and how even just a single eccentric contraction of the muscle can build strength over the course of the day. Now, we definitely didn't recommend just a single eccentric contraction, but a proper movement through a full range of motion involving as much muscle as possible is going to be the most effective and efficient way of building overall muscle, particularly if they're trying to regain. And then also, when you look at isolated exercises, you're using relatively small muscles. Go even with the quadriceps in a leg extension. Quadriceps are the biggest muscle group in the body, more or less. So you're hitting a lot of muscle with that exercise, but think of all the muscles you're avoiding that you have to do now additional exercises in order to
Right.
do that. With the younger people, I see, work with a lot of teenagers. One of the first things they do when they come into the weight room is grab the bar and start doing arm curls because they want to do curls for the girls, right? And I argue with them. I was like, what a waste. You're taking one of the smallest muscles in the body, and even if you double its size because you've done so much curls, how much muscle mass are you really adding? And how much functionality certainly are you adding? You're not going to get much performance out of those curls. You go and you do heavy squats and you're building your quadriceps, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, building up, you're utilizing the back, depending on how you do the squat. You're getting some shoulder work in there, maybe even some chest work. You're getting a total body workout. You double that muscle mass. You've gotten huge, right? And now obviously most of our listeners are not looking to get huge from lifting weights, but they want to try and at least, many of them regain muscle mass because people that probably are most attracted to this are people who are getting a little bit older and realizing that they are getting older and want to age well. What do they have to do? So they might be getting back into lifting. Or we have very old adults who are, significantly atrophied over their lifespan and need to regain muscle for functionality. Those are people that need to gain muscle as efficiently and effectively as possible. I discussed my epigenetics test with TruDi co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Well, let's talk about number 3, hot yoga. Man, I don't even want to read what it says because I'm so angry just hearing the word hot yoga.
What's wrong with hot yoga?
I don't like it. I don't.
Why do you not like hot yoga? I got a lot of friends that really swear by hot yoga. And again, not for the purposes of gaining muscle, but for kind of flexibility, the relieving of stress kind of benefits. So there are benefits to hot yoga.
There are benefits. I'm not denying that there are benefits. Me personally, I just don't like hot yoga. I don't like I like sweating, but I like sweating knowing that I've worked out and pushed myself to that point of sweating. Being in a room where it's just so hot, you instantly start sweating in it, and
You never wrestled.
That's not for me. Yeah,
I like both. I like that sweat from the heat, but also the sweat that's generated from the workout itself. Now, from the standpoint of regaining muscle, if you're completely inactive and you start doing hot yoga and you're contracting those muscles, you are going to see some benefit to the muscle and regaining some of that muscle mass. So he's way off on that one in terms of absolutely don't do this to regain muscle mass. Now, if you weigh it against what's going to be most effective, yes, I would not spend the majority of my time doing hot yoga. I would prioritize resistance exercise, particularly compound movements, whole body exercise in order to facilitate regaining that muscle mass. But there's nothing wrong with compounding that with something like hot yoga for flexibility, mobility, for stress release, and so on. And so this is why I often promote compartmentalizing your exercise. Doing resistance training in, I preferably as many sessions as possible through the week, at least 3 to 4 sessions per week, ideally more up to 6 or as many as 12, depending on your goals and your time commitment. But in additional time, that off time when you're not working out, what's wrong with doing a little bit of hot yoga on an occasion? You're not going to, like cardio, it's not going to have as a diminishing effect on your muscle hypertrophy. In fact, it may actually even have a little bit of a benefit in helping with recovery. So I would poo-poo that one.
Well, I would just make it very clear. I think yoga is great. I do think we need to add some form of stretching or flexibility exercises to our daily routine, I'm just not a fan of hot yoga. You want to do regular yoga or Pilates or some form where you're an athletic stretch. You want to join those athletic stretching courses, then yes, all for it. But something about being in, I don't know. I don't even like being in saunas for that long, though.
Oh, see, I love saunas too. So, and that brings us to, this notion of taking anybody's advice. That's, you got to take it with a bit of a grain of salt because we have our own personal preferences.
Right.
And that's that individualized aspect of exercise that if it works for you, it's going to have benefit. If it's based on sound physiology, then, the body makes specific adaptations to impose demand. And so is hot yoga going to build muscle? Probably not. Is it going to impede on you regaining muscle? Possibly, if you're doing it in lieu of resistance-based exercise. But if you're using it to complement that, and you're maybe not, you're not doing hot yoga and then going into the weight room trying to work out. Because if you try and do a solid resistance workout following a bout of hot yoga, you're probably not going to perform very well. You're not going to lift as much. You're not going to build as much muscle. But if you do it in recovery, I don't see a problem with it. If you don't like it, don't do it. If it works for you, you like it, then do it. But realize that should not be your sole form of exercise for regaining muscle. What else does the author say about hot yoga? Why it's so bad for us as we try to age well?
What the author says is, while some men scoff at the spiritual discipline, anyone who's done a hot yoga session knows it delivers a solid workout that provides several health benefits. However, hot yoga is an efficient calorie burner that can work against muscle growth. Like cardio, yoga provides many benefits, but will not directly help build muscle and may get in the way of it. Hot yoga especially increases sweat and metabolic rate, burning calories that are important for those muscles to build themselves up. If you want or need to do yoga for its benefits, stick to a very low intensity version at a normal room temperature.
Okay, I don't have a problem with the caloric expenditure, the sweating, and all that. There's benefits to that. What you have to remember is that if you're trying to gain muscle, you need to be in a caloric excess. And so if you are doing something that burns an excessive amount of calories, it's going to help burn fat, but it's not going to help you build muscle. And so you need to replace those calories with muscle building fuels, carbohydrate and protein. And if you're getting adequate protein, you're getting sufficient carbohydrate to refuel the muscle. The worst that that's going to do for you is have you get leaner and build muscle at the same time. So I don't see an issue with it. I don't see the conflicting physiology like I see with cardio exercise that might actually impede on the muscle response and recovery. I think this is actually a fairly good recovery tool. It can help get some of that lactic acid out of the system. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Just remember that you got to replace those calories. You got to replace that hydration in order to recover adequately. It's all about recovery and caloric balance and adequate stimulus. And if it's not taken away from the time that we're doing resistance training, what's the harm?
Let's dive into number 4, which is 1 rep max.
Yeah, read a little bit of what he says with the 1 rep max, because there's different approaches, and depending on what he's saying, I could say, yeah, he's right, or yes, he's wrong.
How much do you bench? We've all been asked this before. While your 1 rep max, the maximum amount of weight you can lift at 1 rep of a given movement, indicates overall strength, it doesn't do any favors in the muscle building department. I feel like that's not true at all.
Again, if he's talking about training just doing one repetition at a time. There are training methods that you can actually benefit from that. There's certain types of training where you might say do a one repetition at a percentage of your maximum. Again, you're not necessarily going to be doing a one repetition maximum because one rep is really just testing that strength. It's not really a stimulus for building strength. But you might do one heavy repetition, wait 10, 15 seconds, do another repetition, wait 10, 15 seconds, do another repetition, and repeat that for 5 repetitions, and then take about a minute, minute and a half rest, and then repeat. That's been shown to be beneficial in building strength. Whether it's going to be as beneficial in building total muscle hypertrophy, maybe not. But are we talking about bodybuilding, or are we talking about building functional strength for aging well? And for aging well, as we've talked about in previous podcasts, the correlation for successful aging is more in strength as opposed to hypertrophy. So it's not all about just building muscle. We want to build functional muscle that is able to move more resistance. And so, if you're training just one repetition maximum, first of all, you're going to get hurt. Who goes into the gym and I'm going to one rep as heavy as possible and then I'm done? Or build up to your one repetition maximum every workout. Strength athletes might, real true power Olympic athletes might train at certain periods in their cycling where they're just doing one repetition and building up to that maximum. It's very similar to what the Bulgarian protocol is all about, but you're not getting much in the way of hypertrophy from that. Does he mention, I believe, that the rep range ideally is between 8 and 15? Is that what he says in the article, I believe?
Yeah, he says just doing one rep is not enough to stimulate muscle growth. Muscle needs time under tension, and in one rep, the muscles do not have the strain for too long. Now, if you want to build a heavy one rep, then do drop sets for more reps. That would be fine to get the best of both worlds. So he doesn't even talk as far as that one.
That doesn't even make sense because a drop set, you're moving away from your one repetition maximum, not toward your one repetition maximum. I mean, you might, if you want to improve your one repetition maximum, do more of a pyramid where you go, like a higher volume, higher repetition, kind of lighter intensity, early set, increase the weight, do fewer sets, and then pyramid that up to where you might only be doing one repetition at a near maximal intensity, and then sometimes maybe go back down or something like that. That can have some benefits of building both strength and hypertrophy, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about just simply hypertrophy. And as we've talked about, there are 2 types of hypertrophy. You have sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and myofibrillar hypertrophy. The closer you get to that one repetition maximum, the more you're stimulating the neural adaptations to muscle, and more myofibrillar hypertrophy, where you're strengthening the myofibrils that are the contractile proteins in the muscle that are allowing you to produce more force. That may not give you as much size, but for an aging adult, that can be very beneficial. On the other end of that, higher volume is leading to more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is just increasing the volume of the muscle. It gives us a little bit better appearance, but is that necessarily the type of hypertrophy we need for aging well?
Number 5, lifting light weights at higher reps. So again, in number 4, he literally says here, if you want to build to a heavy one rep map, do drop sets for more reps. And then in number 5, he says lifting light weights at a higher rep is also going to prevent you from. So he kind of contradicts himself there, doesn't he?
Not necessarily. So when you're doing the drop sets, you're basically moving the muscle closer to full muscular failure. So if I do 12 repetitions and I can't do any more, I do a lighter weight, I might be able to squeeze out 8 repetitions this time. And so I'm fatiguing more muscles. I'm starting to pull in more fast twitch muscle fibers as I fatigue the muscle. And as I lower the weight further, I might not be able to do any reps. And that last repetition, depending on how committed you are to your drop set, you might be down to like, if you start with the dumbbells, and you start at like 50-pound dumbbells, you're doing curls, you can drop that, drop that, drop, drop, drop. And then you get down, you're doing like the 5-pound dumbbells and you're straining on those and looking really embarrassed in the gym because people think you are weak because you can't lift a 5-pound dumbbell. That's really a true drop set. And you are so fatigued, your muscles are going to be just numb for days. But that's going to tend to stimulate hypertrophy. What he's talking about with the lighter, high reps is where it's popular now to do. I've seen protocols going up as much as kind of 100 being more of a sweet spot for, again, this is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but taking a weight and building up to where you're doing 100 repetitions of that. I don't agree with them there in terms of that being a negative. It has benefits. It's just going to be a different stimulus for hypertrophy. And you have to consider what are your goals. And ideally, going beyond about 15 repetitions is not necessary. The more you're doing, the more you're starting to work toward muscle endurance. But when you take a weight that you kind of force as many reps, and sometimes like they call them myo reps, where you take a weight, you do as many reps as you can, and then you rest for about 5 seconds and to do as many more as you can. And the goal is usually to get up to about 50 reps or more. That has benefits in terms of fatiguing the muscle to stimulate for growth. And so there are different ways to skin a cat, and you have to consider, how does this work for me personally relative to my goals, and what type of goal do I have? Am I looking at building strength, or am I just simply looking at building an attractive physique? And if we're going for physique, those lighter weights, higher repetitions are going to have some more benefit for physique. Just simply lifting light weights for many repetitions is not going to be beneficial. It has to be pushed to a level of fatigue in order for the benefit to occur. So I think there's some truth in there that don't just simply go to the gym and keep lifting the 5-pound dumbbells for 20, 30 reps and thinking that's going to build muscle mass for you. You need a progression, and you need to take the muscle to a point of fatigue, high level of fatigue.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, I do like for myself, and I'm going to be 60 here in a few months. So I am in that aging population. Guess by some standards, I'm considered an older adult. And I'm starting to really embrace that because trying to do the things that we talk about here age well.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of different exercises where I would say they're high repetitions. I've gotten the best calf development. Not that I have huge calves. It's always been an area that's been very difficult for me to build. But in some of those like accessory muscle groups where I'm just really looking more for kind of a supplemental boost in the physique of the muscle, I like higher reps. I like doing what I call 100s. And so there's different ways you could break down to get to 100 reps. One kind of first way I've probably ever learned to do it was where you do, say like with push-ups, you do 3 push-ups first. You don't do 1 and then 2 because it's just too cumbersome. You do 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 3. And that is accumulation of 100 repetitions. And it's a killer. And you're going to get some hypertrophy from that. You're going to get some good muscle endurance from that. So that's one way to do it. Also like 40, 30, 20, 10s, where I'll do a weight for 40 repetitions, take a break, do usually a heavier weight, but you could do the same weight, but you do 30 repetitions, then do 20 repetitions at a heavier weight, and then 10. That tends to build both strength and some size, and it works. So I don't wholeheartedly agree with them. I think you have to look very carefully at what are we doing with the light weights and high repetitions. Is it bringing us to a point of fatigue? Is it a stimulus for muscle growth? And what type of growth are we trying to stimulate?
Nailed it. And that's it. Those are the 5 things that you need to avoid.
Yeah, and I think avoiding is the wrong word. I think what we want to consider is these are 5 things we want to more carefully consider in our pursuit of regaining muscle mass. And if we do want to regain muscle mass, what are the important things that we need to do? We need to keep it simple, take out some of that complexity of the exercise. So do the 5 basic movement patterns. So something like a squat type of variation, a hip hinge variation like the RDL, a bench or a horizontal push, or, again, you could vary that angle of the push, but a bench, a rowing movement, and then more of an overhead press type of movement. Also incorporating carries or some other more functional core type of exercise into that workout. Those should be the things that we focus most on. If you have time and if you have the desire, then you go into some of those accessory muscle groups to kind of supplement, to kind of build up some weaker areas. In a rep range, I think a good starting point is that 5 rep range. It's kind of a good balance between strength and hypertrophy. And again, if your volume is there, you're going to get some size.
How many sets?
And again, you could vary those sets. Depends on the amount of warm up you're doing, what intensity you're doing at those 5. I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5 sets is most adequate. You start getting beyond that, you start getting a little bit too fatigued. It's taking too much time. And for those of us that are just trying to age well, we want to be efficient with time. You can go higher in the number of repetitions. Typically, if you go a little bit higher, you're going to go fewer sets. So you might be looking at, maybe 3 sets of anywhere from 8 to 12, 8 to 15 repetitions, but varying that up, so you're not always doing just 5, you're not always doing 15. I like to sometimes kind of mix it up where I do kind of a third of my workouts during the week are going to be in that 13 to 15 repetition range for 3 sets, then be in the 10 to 12 range or 8 to 10 range for kind of the middle workouts, and then having a workout where I'm doing anywhere from 3 to 5 repetitions for more of that pure strength. Again, it depends on where you are in your fitness journey. If you are looking at regaining muscle, I think a really good starting point for somebody who has not lifted in a while and trying to get that muscle back, the simple Strong Lifts 5x5 is a good program to start with and build that basic strength quickly. With that strength is going to come hypertrophy. But we need to recover. So we maybe need to do that hot yoga once in a while to get a little bit of recovery, get our flexibility improved. But we have to eat properly and sufficiently to regain that muscle. Now, if you're significantly overweight and you're trying to gain muscle and lose fat, you still need to be in a caloric deficit because if you're eating 5,000 calories a day and you're 30% body fat, you're going to remain at a high percentage of body fat, even though you're building some muscle at that caloric level. So you need to cut calories, but cut the calories slowly so that we're still able to stimulate a muscle hypertrophy. Keep the cardio to a minimum. Focus on high intensity interval type of training and a lot of walking to help burn those calories without impeding recoverability. And what else?
Continue to age well.
Yeah, continue to age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.